So I want you to think back to when you learned how to ride a bike. I know for some of you, you were born like, it was like you were born on a bike. You could do it. You don't remember ever being trained. But for the rest of us, perhaps it was a traumatic experience. All I can remember, and I don't remember a ton of learning how to ride a bike, but all I can remember is this moment in this school parking lot where I'm like, Dad, don't let go of the bike. Dad, don't let go of the bike. And I look back and he let go of the bike. And then I wrecked my bike, okay? I remember that, but, it's like the trauma of learning how to ride a bike is kind of nerve-wracking until you have kids, and then you realize that it's like a different kind of stress and trauma in your life, But once, like for me, maybe for you, once you learn how to ride a bike, it's like freedom. It's like a whole new world opens up. We had a little town, Belleville, Ohio, like 2,000 people. And I was in a biker gang, it was like 4 of us rolling around town with a little BMX bike. And, we did this, I haven't said this before, but we take the lid off of a Crisco container and put it on the back tire of the bike. Does anybody else do this? So that it make like the little moped as you go along? Yeah, you never done that? It'll blow your mind, all right? Go home and try that. Yeah, like 45-year-old adults on the bike trail. Wah. That'd be great. I think some of you should do that and put it on Instagram. I'd like that a lot. Okay. So anyway, when you're teaching, I'm getting off track. It's the 12:30 service. You can tell. I've done this before. Okay. So as you're teaching kids, here's something that I noticed. It's like I know the freedom of what it's like to ride a bike, and I want them to experience that. But when it comes time to teaching them, you get stuck. And here's the thing. Training wheels are a lie, okay? They don't train kids to do anything except get used to 4 wheels instead of 2. And so you got to get behind that bike and hold the seat. And here's what happened with my kids, and I've helped 3 of them, is when they're learning how to ride a bike, they get this thing called the lean, okay? I'm holding them like, why? They're like leaning to the left. It's like they are trying to do with their body what they don't trust the bike can do for them. And so they spend a lot of time like trying hard, leaning there, because they don't trust that the bike will actually balance them. But once that clicks, once that moment clicks where they're like, I can trust the bike, a whole new world opens up. And I think that's a powerful picture of the journey that God wants to invite us on. And too often we spend a lot of time and energy trying to do things by ourselves, on our own power, in our own framework. And we end up exhausting ourselves. We get stressed out. Some people come to the conclusion that the spiritual journey isn't worth it. And it's not. If all you're doing is trying to do it on your own. If all you're doing is trying to live a life that's pleasing to God. And working harder to be all that God created us to be. No, God invites us to trust Him, to trust that He can do what we cannot, to trust that when we trust our whole lives to God, His strength will begin to transform us from the inside out. He invites us into a new way to live. And I'm not saying it doesn't have problems. I'm not saying that it's always easy, but man, I'm telling you, once you begin to experience it, it's like, man, I can't believe I've lived any other way. I mean, fundamentally, that's what this series is all about. It's what we're trying to do as a community, as a church community. It's really what's captured in the memory verse, that the eyes of the Lord are searching the whole earth, looking to what? To strengthen those whose hearts are fully His. God wants to pour out His grace, His strength, His power in our life. But it comes not as we try to do more to please God, but as we learn how to trust. And so last week, I asked you the question, what's the condition of your heart? Where this begins is our heart trusting God, because the state of your heart, it sets the direction of your life. Empty heart, empty life. Half a heart, half a life. Bitter heart, bitter life. But a full heart, a heart that's trusting God, has God's blessing and strength pouring out through us. And so one of the tangible and practical places to evaluate this, we talked about this last week, is when it comes to our finances. When it comes to your finances, where you spend them and where you give them. Because where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And so I asked you to go home and think about this, and I want to kind of pick up that story where we've left it off. And again, for those of you, I know here's what happens. As soon as this starts to creep up, especially in church, especially because of some of your experiences, people start to feel like this is what's going on. Oh, this is what you need to do. The guilt, the shame, the whatever, the pressure, and I need you to let all of that go. Because really, I'm not asking you to do anything today other than to think about how are you trusting God with your life. And so, to prepare us for that, let's take a deep breath and let's go, okay, God, I'm ready to receive whatever it is that you have for me in the next few minutes. Will you do that while I pray? God, thanks. Thanks that you invite us into an incredible journey of trusting you. And God, sometimes it can be a little intimidating. Sometimes it gets us nervous if the training wheels come off. Can we really trust you? And so, God, would you set aside distractions, relieve emotion, but prepare our hearts to receive what you have for us today, and use me in any way that you can over the next few minutes, we ask. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, thanks. I want to welcome each and every one of you, whatever campus you're at. If you're tuning in online, thanks for joining us online, or perhaps later on in the week, thanks for setting aside a section of your week to invest into your life, into your spiritual journey. There's a special group that's here at all of our campuses that I want to acknowledge. They're sitting over here to my left, and they're the students at all of our campuses. How are you guys doing today? It's good to have you. And I know we have student sections at 12:30 at all of our campuses, so thanks for joining in. In fact, if I could say this now, because I might forget later, but getting some of this at your age and stage of life can be a game changer. Can be a game changer for the way that you navigate the next 20 to 50 years of your life. It just helps set the course. And so as I was thinking about where in the Bible I want to go to help kind of unpack the practical ways that we need to live with heart, and the practical ways, where would be a place that would give us vision on what this practically looks out, this is one of the things that we do every week. We try to find a little section of the Bible. We take an intentional, deep look at that passage and pull out some key takeaways. And for me, I was drawn to this particular passage in a portion of the Bible called Corinthians, 1 Corinthians. Originally, it was a letter written from a pastor to the church that he had helped start. And if you were to summarize what the whole letter is about, I would say 1 Corinthians is about inspiring and equipping the church to live with one heart, to live with heart. And here's what happened. Paul helped start the church, and there were Christians who were living, trusting God with what he had given them and trusting God to make a difference in their community. And as he left to start other churches in other cities, something began to happen in that church, that group of Christians in Corinth. They began to experience a divided heart. They began to argue over who was better and who was doing more important work and who was a deeper preacher. Not that we would ever argue with anything like that today, but it's like all the way back then, they were like, Paul is great. He's the one who started the church. And there was another group that was like Apollos. He was another preacher, another person in that church. They're like, Apollos' teaching is better. And so they began to divide. And so Paul was writing this letter to inspire them to live with one heart. If you think about it, in that letter is the love chapter, 1 Corinthians 13, love is patient and love is kind, and all of the things that you hear at weddings. He wasn't writing to married couples. I mean, it's helpful for married couples, but he was trying to inspire the church to live with one heart. In that same letter, he talked about spiritual gifts, how every single one of us has a spiritual gift. A unique expression of God's Holy Spirit that is equipping us to make a difference in one body, in one movement of people. Come on, live with one heart is what he was saying. And at the beginning of this letter, there are 10 verses that he begins to unpack or give vision, give clarity on what it looks like to live with heart, where we need to begin in understanding this. And so there are, as I was thinking about it, there are 10 verses with 10 key takeaways in 10 verses. This is what's amazing. The Bible is full of all sorts of takeaways. And as I was talking to our team about this, they're like, and you're going to talk about all 10? I'm like, yeah. Why? Is that a problem? They're like, you could talk about that all day. I'm like, is that a problem? The Cedar Creek kids team was like, well, no, we'll just bring the kids in at the hour mark, and you can have them in the auditorium with you. And so it's like, well, I'll do it in 10 minutes. They're like, there's no way. So I'm going to do 10 key takeaways from 10 verses in 10 minutes. And so far, I've been doing pretty good. I've gotten it close, but we got a little timer up here just to get things going. And I didn't say start the timer. Okay, they're serious. Get going, Ben. All right, so are you ready? Do you think I can do? Some of you don't think I can do this. All right, we're gonna dive right in. Here's the first verse. He says this: each of us did with the work that the Lord gave us. Meaning, Paul and Apollos. Each of us are doing the work that God gave us. God has work for Paul. God has work for Apollos. And key takeaway number one is God has work for each and every one of us. Do you like that? I like that. Yeah, I like that. That's good. It's ding, number one. Here we go. Okay, so I planted the seed. Paul, planted the seed in your hearts. Apollos watered it, but it was God who made it grow. Here, Paul is using farming terms to help give vision to what it looks like with heart. We all have work to do. Paul planted, Apollos watered, God is the one who made it grow. Here's key takeaway number two. Your work looks different than my work, okay? My work looks different than your work. Your work looks different than each other's work. This is so important because if we're not careful, we'll think there is only one thing to do to live with heart. And the truth is, we all have work to do. And even though our work may look a little different, God's using each of us to make an eternal difference. So he says this, it's not important who does the planting or who does the watering. What's important is that God makes the seed grow. And so key takeaway number three is God's strength is what matters most. It's not the work that I'm doing, it's God's strength through me. Why? When you trust God with your whole heart, His strength transforms your life. His strength uses the work that you are doing, where you are doing it, to create to make a difference, to create something in other people's lives that you can't do on your own. Which means key takeaway number four is you need to stop comparing, period. Some of you, you just need to write that one key takeaway down. Because you spend so much time in your head comparing your life, what you should be doing, what you're not doing, what you could be doing to what other people are doing, and it's exhausting. God never created you to carry that burden. So stop comparing, period, and instead begin to think about how you were designed to live with heart. Here's what he says, the one who plants and the one who waters, look at this, work together with the same purpose. Whatever work we're doing, we're trying to accomplish the same goal. In other words, working together makes the fruit better. You see what I did there? Yeah, that's a pun. That's punny, okay? That's fun. I don't care who you are. Okay. Good. So, I mean, he's talking about if you have somebody who plants but no water, the fruit doesn't taste as good. And if you have someone who's watering but there's no planting going on, you don't got any fruit. And so when it comes to the work that God's put in front of us, man, all of our work matters. We're working together to accomplish the same goal. I put it this way, one heart, one mission, one freaking huge impact. When we begin to live with one heart. In fact, if you look at the first church in the book of Acts, it's so cool to go back and read about how this first group of Christians began to experience God's strength through them. It said in Acts chapter 4 that they were of one heart and they were on mission together and they shared everything that they had. And then it says that God's grace poured out on them. God's strength poured through them. It was evident that God was at work in their midst. And then the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. It's powerful when a movement of people are living with one heart, one mission, and be able to experience one freaking huge impact. Okay, I'm getting a little sidetracked on Acts here. Let's keep going. The one who plants and the one who waters works together with the same purpose. So both will be rewarded. That's a key word. Both will be rewarded for what? For their own hard work. He's going to talk about that in a minute. We are both God's workers. Apollos and Paul, we're both God's workers, and you are God's field. And if you notice, he begins to shift the metaphor here. You are God's building. In other words, God is moving you. He is helping you take steps on the spiritual journey of knowing God, finding freedom, discovering your purpose. So that what? So that you will go and make a difference, so that you will help someone else move. Here's what that means. Key takeaway number 6, you matter and your hard work matters to God. You matter because God is putting people in your life to help you take steps on that spiritual journey. You are God's field. God is trying to build something in you. But ultimately where that's going to lead is for you and I to make a difference in someone else's life. Your hard work matters too. And in the end, as you're going to see, some of our hard work is going to be rewarded. Look at what Paul says. Because of God's grace given to me, I have laid the foundation like an expert builder. He's laid the foundation. Now he's talking about building, not farming. And he says, now others are building on it. Whoever is building on this foundation must be very careful. Why? For no one can lay any foundation other than the one we already have, Jesus Christ. Key takeaway number 7 is that Jesus is essential to lasting change. There's a lot of really good self-help stuff out there. And not all of it is helpful, but some of it is helpful. And when you study it, you know what's interesting is you notice a lot of it is rooted in timeless biblical truths. It's the way that God hardwired us from the very beginning. But man, if the foundation isn't Jesus, Jesus taught this about himself. He said, build your life on my teaching. It's like rock. And anywhere else is like building your house on the sand. When the storms of life come, if I'm not your foundation, good luck. That's the Ben Snyder paraphrase. So Jesus is essential to lasting change. He says, anyone who builds on that foundation, on Jesus, may use, this is what's interesting, a variety of materials, gold, silver, jewels, wood, hay, or straw. And here's what he says. But on the judgment day, with all of those building materials, fire will reveal what kind of work each builder has done. The fire will show if a person's work has any real value. At some point, at the end of our life, all of the things that we invested our time in, and we're not talking about sin, we're not talking about destructive stuff, we're just talking about the potentially good things, the work that we did here on earth, it's going to be put to fire. And it's going to reveal what kind of value our investment of time, talent, and treasure really had. And so here's key takeaway number 8. Not all work has the same value. Just talk to someone at the end of their life, and you can hear it in their voice. Not all the things that they did have the same value at the end of our life, and the same is true for us on Judgment Day, when at the end of our life, in light of eternity. Look at what he says. He says, on Judgment Day, if the work survives on Judgment Day, the fire, the builder will receive a what? A reward. But if the work is burned up, the builder will suffer a great loss. The builder will be saved, but like someone barely escaping through a wall of flames. He's not talking about our eternal salvation. That can only be done through Jesus. But what we spend our time, effort, energy, resources on here on earth will be put to the test. And so key takeaway number 9 is good things does not always equal eternal things. You can invest your life in good things that are good here, that are good from an earthly perspective, but that does not automatically make them eternal things. And so key takeaway number 10 is this. When we trust God with our earthly resources, when we trust Him with what He has given us, our time, our talent, our treasure, His strength will transform that into something that makes an eternal difference. And so there you have it. 10 key takeaways in a minute 40. Minute 40 to spare. How's that? Yeah, thank you. I'm sweating up here, okay? Here's the problem, you guys. Some of you didn't pay attention to a thing I said. You just kept watching the clock the whole time just to see if I was going to make it. It's like, what was he talking? What are we talking about today? So if you missed the 10 key takeaways, they're going to be on the Living It Out. That's available on our app. It's an email that you can subscribe to that basically sends a follow-up devotional after a weekend message to help you continue learning and knowing God throughout your week. It's a helpful resource. I would encourage all of you to subscribe to. Those will be available there for those of you who couldn't take notes fast enough either. But the bottom line that I really want you thinking about, I mean, maybe there was a key takeaway that you need to install into your life, but this is fundamentally what Paul was teaching here. He was thinking, when you trust God with earthly resources, instead of comparing and instead of thinking you don't have work to do, instead think about using your earthly resources with His strength and trust that that's going to make an eternal difference. When we trust God with eternal resources, His strength transforms them to make an eternal difference. If you're taking notes, I want you to write that in the bottom line section of your notes. Because fundamentally, that needs to kind of change the way that we live. Now, please don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that this is the path that we need to take in order to please God. Otherwise, God will be really disappointed with us. No, this isn't how hard we need to try, the effort that we need to employ to impress God. No, this is about learning how to ride the spiritual bike of trusting God. And when we trust God with the time and the talent and the treasure that He's given us, it opens our eyes to a new way to live where you don't look at your life the same way again. And so the key question that's been introduced to me that I want to share with you is we need to ask this. If you're taking notes, write this down. What's my EROI? What's my EROI? In other words, what is my eternal return on investment? We think about this all the time when it comes to our retirement account. Where are we investing in what kind of return are we getting? Now, some of you, you're remembering last week and you're thinking to yourself, yeah, but Ben, you said God cares more about where we are giving from more than what we are giving to. Yes, that's true. God wants us to give from a heart that's not trying to please him, but a heart that's trusting him, that's open-handed. God blesses an open hand more than a closed fist. But God does care what we give to. He just cares most about the heart that we are giving from. And so that key question that we need to ask is, what's my eternal return on investment? I mean, think about your life. What have you invested your time, your talent, and yes, your treasure into? Is there any eternal return on that stuff? Or is it all about life here? You may be asking, well, how do I know what my EROI is? Great question. I'm so glad you asked. We talked about this last week. The first step of that is knowing the great commandment. Jesus was asked, what's the greatest commandment? And he said, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. In other words, when you trust God with your life, his strength, because of what Jesus accomplished on the cross and the empty tomb, make it possible for us to live eternally with God forever. Think about that, eternal return on investment. You surrender your life and follow Jesus, and Jesus makes it possible for you to enjoy eternity with God in heaven forever. That's a pretty good EROI. We all need to do that. I think that's the most important individual decision anyone can make. But along with the great commandment is Jesus' invitation to love the world. He wants to give us a heart that's generous to those who are in need, the orphans and the widows, to the hungry, to whoever the needy are. And so we, as Jesus followers, should be leading the way and helping make our world a better place. But not just to make the world a better place, to make an eternal difference. Jesus calls that the Great Commission. That's the other part of the EROI that's really important. Are we making disciples? Are we helping people know what it means to follow Jesus? Because here's the deal. If all we do is preach about Jesus and talk about Jesus, but your audience has empty bellies, it's going to be hard for them to hear. But on the flip side, you could feed the whole world. You could give clean water to the whole world, and at the end of their life, they still die. And what are they left with? You see, we need to be thinking about the EROI of the work that God has given each of us. Because someday, at the end of our life, we're going to see a judgment day where the work, the effort, the time that we invested here on earth will be tested. For those of you that call Cedar Creek home, maybe you've never thought about the EROI as it relates to this place. The investment that you have made here and the difference that that's making here and around the world. So I asked our video team to kind of put together what God has been up to in our church. Let's watch.
At Cedar Creek, we believe that every dollar given to the church goes towards missions. But what does that mean? Traditionally, when we think of missions, we think of third world countries. With our partnership with Great Commission Latin America, international missions are an important part of what we do. GCLA's mission is to plant, develop, and multiply churches in Latin America. Through GCLA, we partner with local churches to provide help and hope in their communities. Over the years, you've volunteered over 100,000 hours through mission trips and given over $1 million to support GCLA. Because of your generosity, we continue to help build houses, feed children, and provide health care. But it's about more than meeting a physical need. It's an effort to break the cycle of poverty. The CDI, a children's development program run by GCLA, greatly impacts the lives of 640 children every year. By removing obstacles that keep students from school, they provide greater opportunities for the next generation. When the local church cares for the whole family, they can show God's love to their community. Cedar Creek has also partnered with local churches in the U.S., helping plant churches like Rock City in Columbus, Ohio, and Elevate in Erie, Pennsylvania. God has shown up in each community, and across all of our church partners, 2,623 people have gotten baptized. Know that every time you give, You play a part in those baptisms. We also have relationships with local churches across the country that allow us to support communities that need help after natural disasters. We believe God calls us to take care of our own community here locally. Through our partnership with UTMC and the clinic at South Toledo, an average of 50 people per week are provided free health care. While we collectively do many things for our cities throughout the year, one of the most rewarding relationships Cedar Creek has is with Calvin Sweeney and Tabernacle Church.
Our vision for the tabernacle comes out of Matthew 5:16, where Jesus says to let your light shine before men so that they can see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. And so our vision is to illuminate our community through bold acts of love so that our community can begin to glorify our Father in heaven. I had an opportunity to go to Honduras with Pastor Lee Powell, and it was our first time meeting. And it was at this Honduras trip that I saw a church really resourcing the community, really letting their light shine in a way that I hadn't seen in my city or even in our country. And while I was in Central America, I remember one night thinking that if this can happen in Central America, it can happen in Central Toledo. I had a meeting with our leadership team, and I said, I've seen a church illuminate their community in ways that we haven't. And I said, we'll no longer just be a Sunday and a midweek church. We're gonna be a 7-day, 365 days out of the year church. And so we began to look at how we could begin to connect more resources with our community. We don't wanna just keep the hope here inside the building. We need to be ambassadors of hope. And so we started going out, block by block, house to house, neighborhood by neighborhood, sharing the love of Jesus Christ. Through our relationship with Cedar Creek and its financial support, we've been able to build out our outreach ministries and provide more hope to people in our community. We've also been able to create better environments in our physical church structure, in our sanctuary, in our children ministry area. We've been able to create environments where people want to come and worship.
When we say every dollar goes towards missions, that includes our weekend service. We believe the local church is the hope of the world, and we are uniquely equipped to provide a weekend experience designed to help people take their next steps on the spiritual journey, moving them closer to the heart of God. Over our 23-year history, we've seen 9,213 baptisms. Currently, there are 17,083 people who call Cedar Creek home. Every invite has the potential to make a difference in someone's life, and every person who walks through our doors has a story that matters.
I was 20 years old when I lost my dad. That's when I really started questioning God, and if there is a God, and if there is, why is so many bad things happening to me? Why would you take such a great person away from me? I wouldn't pray, I wouldn't go to church. My mom tried to get me to go because she's been diehard Catholic since she was a kid. Nick, you gotta go with me, you gotta go with me. I'm like, Mom, it's not for me. Obviously, God doesn't want anything good in my life. What do you want me to do? What do you want me to say to him? I was doing some shopping at ABC Warehouse, and some guy just started talking. We started chitter-chatting, two guys in the electronics section. That was like Christmas for us. He eventually reached in his pocket and he pulled out a card. It was a Cedar Creek card. He's like, you ever been to Cedar Creek? And I said, never been. I've always heard about it, but it's not my thing. I don't go to church. Threw it in my wallet, kind of forgot about it. And as I'm going through my wallet one day, I picked out the card. And I said, you know what, it's Christmas time. I had all the services on there. I said to myself, let's just go check it out. So we pull up, and I'm nervous because I haven't had a conversation with God since probably when my dad died, and I asked God, why are you taking him from me? So it was emotional for me to even walk into church for the first time. We walk in, and before we even walk through the doors, we're getting greeted by some of the most amazing people you could ever come encounter with. And keep in mind, these people have no idea who I am. I've never been to Cedar Creek. They don't know my past, they don't know my history. I feel like I get judged a lot because there has been times where I kind of get that look. So it's kind of hard to walk in a new place like that, any new place for that, because they don't know who you really are. But they're so welcoming, so loving from the second you even pull in the parking lot and get out of your car. They're shaking your hand and saying Merry Christmas. And they're not talking to you like you're just another person walking through the door. They're talking to you as if you matter. And they make you feel that way from the second that you walk in. So I go in, we sit down, we get some drinks, of course. And just from the very first song, I knew that I'm home. 30-something years old, and it took me this long to be able to call a place home. I think just my whole life kind of came together in just one moment with the first song, and tears. Like, I wasn't crying. It was weird. It was just tears were just constantly pouring out of my eyes. Ever since I was a little boy, my mom said that I would either sit by the radio, or if I saw a band, I would sit as close as I could just because of the music. Now, for some people, they just hear a song and they sing along to it, but for me, it's more than that. And then when you shut the music off and Ben comes on stage and he tells his message, it doesn't get any better than that, because it feels every single time that Ben is talking to me. When I first started bringing God back into my life, I started asking at night when I would pray, God, what are you able to do for me this week? Now I feel like I tell God, what can I do for you? So it's not only a Sunday service for me, it's a Sunday service where I gain the knowledge. So once I leave there, I can make a difference.
Whether it's feeding children in Latin America or offering a weekend experience in Northwest Ohio, everything we do is missions, and we do everything with heart.
Hopefully that gives you just a taste. And I know for me, for our team, it was hard because it feels like you were skipping like a rock, skipping over the water over so many amazing stories. Amazing stories of your invites given with heart, of your prayers, of your investment, of your mission trips that you've teamed up on, of your groups, of the ways in which God has used you, us collectively, His strength. He gets the credit, not us, but He decides to invite us in on this journey where our humble, meager, earthly resources are used in some way, shape, or form to make an eternal difference in the person that might be sitting next to you. So when it comes to what God may be up to and how He wants us to trust Him for what's next, I get excited. I think about where we've been and what that could mean for where we are going next. And fundamentally, what this begins to look like is God putting His thumbprints on our life. I mean, that's what the With Heart logo is really all about. Is when we trust God with our heart, He begins to put His thumbprints on our life. We begin to care about the things that He cares about. We begin to see our lives the way that He sees our lives. Because when we trust God with heart, His strength begins to transform our life. So man, those are the steps that we want to invite you into. It's a new way to live. And when I begin thinking about what God has done through you, with His strength, through you in the past, imagine what could be next. Like our partnership with Great Commission Latin America. I spent a week there 2 weeks ago. They invited me to come down to speak to their church pastors and leaders. They had 400 people coming from all different countries around Latin America. And here's the thing, I'm supposed to inspire them. Their stories are inspiring for me. They're leaving their home to go to another country to start a church to help people understand who Jesus is and how much they matter to Him. And you know what their dreams are? In the next 5 years, they want to plant an additional 26 churches throughout Latin America. I don't know about you, but I want to be a part of that. That kind of stuff fires me up. I want to get in on that eternal return on investment. And so as a church, we're going to continue to invest, but we would love to increase our capacity to invest in the work that God is doing through them throughout Latin America, and then celebrate with them along the way. Think about Calvin Sweeney. I know he's been here to speak a few times. You're going to hear him in a couple of weeks in our next series that we're starting in November. But the work that he's doing in Central City is truly special. And it was his trip, think about this, his trip to Honduras coming back that gave him a fresh vision of what God may want to do through him. Uniquely wired, uniquely positioned to do what we cannot. And so instead of Cedar Creek trying to pioneer the way, I would rather partner with incredible leaders like that and increase not just our time and our talent, which we have been, but also some financial investment to help him win and reach people in ways that we can't. I believe God's going to use him to help transform our city. Man, I would love to be a part of that. I hope you would too. And you know what? It's not just external to Cedar Creek. I think God's doing amazing stuff here. Every week in our kids program, God is installing things into their lives, into my kids' lives, into students' lives, the next generation. And we're having important, valuable, fun, life-giving conversations in a pivotal window. And you know what our dream is, especially for the kids area? I mean, we're dreaming of Disney. We want that experience to be like Disney, but have you been to Disney lately? You know how much they charge for you to get in there? It's like half of your retirement account. It's like, have fun. It's the happiest place on earth. Yeah, it's crazy. So could you imagine that at church? It's like, hey, welcome to Cedar Creek. It's going to be $4,000 for your kids. I mean, that's never going to work, So even though we don't have all the resources, what we can't do is fall behind what our kids are experiencing in daycare and school and the library. We need to make sure that that's an engaging environment for them to invite their friends to. And man, a fresh influx of resources helps us stay on the cutting edge of what is possible in that crucial time period. Man, I get excited about what that means for the next generation of our church. I also get excited about our digital presence. What we're offering online is super unique, and it does not replace what you're able to physically experience in the room. But I believe God strategically positioned me and our church to lead the way and leverage this for an eternal return on investment. That's why in November, with our series called Pause, not like animal pause, okay, like pause on the Walkman or, like the TV remote. Some of you don't know what a Walkman is. I just realized that. That's embarrassing. Yeah, we'll talk about that later. Pause. It's like it's not stopping, it's not rewinding, it's not fast forwarding. It's learning the art of pausing so that God can step into the middle of whatever it is that we're doing. It's going to be a great series. We start that in November. Here's what we're also going to do. Monday to Friday, we're going to start rolling the entire Cedar Creek service every 2 hours. You're never more than an hour away from experiencing a Cedar Creek service. Think about how that changes your invite. It's not like, hey, what are you doing next weekend? It's like, hey, what are you doing for lunch? Let's go to church over lunch. What? Yeah, you can watch it right here. We're going to be able to, we want to learn how to leverage that in order to make a difference. And it's not just what's happening online. I think we're just starting to scratch the surface. I'm beginning to see opportunity for us through what we are currently learning at Oregon, where we might be able to go into new cities, new environments that don't have a life-giving church to help invest in something that is eternal. And so I want to give my life to this. It means we're going to need, yes, resources. It means we're going to need leaders. It means we're going to need people stepping up in a new way. But I believe when we trust God with our earthly resources, you and I begin to experience His strength in a unique way. I've experienced it here. It's changed the way that I live. And I want you to experience it too. And here's why this is so important to me. A couple months ago, I was presented with some information that reminded me of the sense of urgency that helps put this in perspective. I'll show it to you on the screen. This is the change in Christian percentage of population from 1970 to 2015. On the bottom left-hand side of the map, you see in the dark red are the countries that have decreased in Christian percentage of population 10 to 40%. The lighter red is a decrease of 1 to 9%. The gray is little change. The blue is an increase of 1 to 9%. The dark blue is an increase of 10 to 60%. Look at where Christianity is growing in the world, where it is rapidly growing. It's amazing when you think about that. I mean, on the one hand, you're like, wow, God is choosing, or God is working in countries that we assumed, man, there's very little work of God at all. But let's look at that map again. If you were God, where would you be concerned? I mean, I don't know about you, but I was looking at the United States of America, and I'm going, man, sometimes what we assume we have here, we are potentially losing sight of the incredible mission field right outside of our door, right here, right now. And for me, that map helped give me clarity to why I was invited to be lead pastor of this church for this season. Why potentially you are here, why Cedar Creek is the way that it is, because God, His eyes are searching the earth. And He cares deeply about people who are far from Him. And He's looking to strengthen those whose hearts are fully His. So I want us thinking about that, because I think that's part of the reason you're here. It's an invitation to trust that God wants to use you to make a difference. And so we were talking about this as a team. How can we quantify this? How can we make it tangible for us? And so we started we started thinking about it numerically, and here's what we came up with. If we were to quantify what it would cost to help someone take a step spiritually, we calculated, and I can give you the math on how we got here, it's $26.37. Now, There's no perfect number. This isn't like, yes, money back guaranteed. This is just a way, that's not what this is about. This is just a way to think about our earthly resources. $26.37. That's what it costs to impact one life, to help one person take a step spiritually. And so last week when I sent you home thinking about the condition of your heart and maybe a step that I'm not asking you to take, I'm asking for you to pray, God, what's the step that you want me to take? If you're thinking about becoming a first-time giver, maybe that's a way to think about it. I want to impact one life, 2637. Maybe you're thinking, I want to impact 10 lives. $263.70. 10 lives. I want to, instead of thinking about it of what's mine, think about how we can use earthly resources and trust them to God, and He uses that to change lives. What if it's 1,000 lives? Or 100 lives? 2,637. I mean, see, suddenly, now all of a sudden what we're giving begins to look a little bit different. And for those of you that are giving, what's the step that maybe you need to take? I mean, think about what you've already given and put that in an EROI mindset, and suddenly things begin to change. I feel like part of my role here is to help make it understandable. And so what we did is we took the median income of the 3 counties where we have campuses, Hancock, Wood, and Lucas County. So we took the median income and we made an average. It's $48,125. Some of you make more, some of you make less, but this is what the research says is the median income. And so let's just say, I want to be more intentional with giving, and I'm going to start at 3%, like 3%, great. $1,443, or $120 a month, or $27 a week. Think about this. Instead of thinking about it just in my dollars, think about how God can use that to make an eternal return on investment. That would equal 52 lives in a year, a life a week. God's using that. It's not the difference we're making alone. It's together God's using that to make a difference. I mean, that's powerful. Yes, God cares more about where we are giving from than what we are giving to. But when we understand what we are giving to, it can help inspire our hearts that we are giving from. And so this has been helpful for me and for our team. Let's think about, let's say, I'm at the 3% or whatever. I want to move up to 6. It's $2,887 for the year, $248 a month, 56 a week. And how many lives is that? That's 109 lives. That's almost 2 lives a week that you're going, you know what? I'm committing to making an eternal, that's the kind of eternal return on investment. Or maybe if you took a step up to the tithe, the 10% mark, this is kind of the biblical value that Jesus affirmed and is taught in the Jewish scriptures. This is what we trust God with, no strings attached. This is kind of the baseline, $4,812, which I know for some of you may feel like a lot, $401 a month, $92 a week. Think about this, 182 lives a year. That's almost 3.5 people every single week that you're making a difference in. And here's the thing, this isn't addition. This isn't like just adding it up, it's multiplication. Because you know why? Somebody invested financially to create space for a guy like me to show up at Cedar Creek 19 years ago. And so it wasn't like one and done. No, that one investment, that 2637, I became now someone who is in turn investing in other, it's multiplication. It's an exponential return on investment when we work together to make a difference. And so I hope you think about that. Not just in terms of, what do I need to do to please God? No, it's like God's given us stuff to make an eternal return on investment, which means some of you, God has given more than you need. I know for my wife and I, we got to this stage where we were trusting God. We were giving 10%, and we were coasting. It was like we were comfortable. It's not bad to enjoy the other 90% and live on that. That's great. But I heard someone say, you know what, I want God to be the number one priority in my life. And so we looked at what we were spending on a monthly basis, and I wanted to make sure that it was the largest check that I wrote each month. And I know for me, for my wife and I, we were like, I wonder what the largest check is that we write. And it was to our mortgage. And so we decided to take a step. Not because we need to do that to please God, but because I saw it as an invitation to trust. Because I want to live in a place that God is my number one priority. And so we took that step. And then as time went on, we were challenged again to maybe make it progressive, increase every year as a step of increasing my trust in God. And every time God has met us there. And so every year, every other year around there, we go up 1%, 0.5%. We just want to continue to progress in this generosity. And so some of you are there. And so some of you can give. You have capacity to give beyond. And so when you get to that beyond the 10%, there's a set of questions. I call them legacy EROI questions. Because some of you, you're very generous. You give a lot of places. And so here's what I would ask you to consider when you're giving at that kind of level. Here's the first question. First, am I trusting God first? Am I giving to a local life-giving church, whether that's Cedar Creek or someone else? 10%. Why? Because God cares more about where you're giving from than what you're giving to. This isn't about me picking all of my favorite places first. This is about me trusting God first. And then when God continues to show up, then I'm going to look for strategic ways to invest a legacy EROI. When we're doing that, here's the next question that I would encourage you to ask. What is the foundation of what I'm giving to? Is the foundation in any way connected with Jesus? Because there's a lot of great nonprofits out there, but man, I think it's important when it comes to EROI that we're thinking about what connection is there to the eternal implications of people's lives? Which means here's another question that you can ask is, where's the life-giving church? Where's the local church and what I'm giving to? Is there a local church connected? We prefer partnering with local churches. Why? Because you can build a house in Honduras for a family in need. There's lots of opportunity to do that. But once you leave, that family will most likely sell that house, take the proceeds, go back, live in the dump, and live off of that proceeds doing whatever they want for the next few months or year. But when you partner with a local life-giving church and you build a house in partnership with them, they help mentor, disciple, equip that family to not just squander this opportunity, but to leverage it for generations to come. And so that's why, what did Jesus say? Jesus says, I am building my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. So if this is what Jesus is doing, man, we should look for local life-giving churches to invest in. And the last question that I would ask is, what are the results? What results are they producing? Can they show you any tangible results? And so if you find something that has a better return on investment than here, I tell you, man, invest your life there. And you may have a few places that you like, but for me, this church and how God is using it, man, I haven't been able to find a better return on investment when you give to and give through Cedar Creek. And so I want you to come back next week. I want you to go home and think about this card. If you don't have one, it's in the seat pocket in front of you. If you're parents, I want you to talk about it with your kids. My 6th grader came home last week and said, okay, Dad, let's talk. Man, that's a powerful conversation. Not for how we need to please God, but what it looks like to trust Him. And so come back as we wrap up next week, this series, ready to take a step wherever you're at. Continuing the step that you're already at or taking a step, an increased step of trusting Him. I want you to pray about that. Ask God, what's the step that you want me to take? And be prepared to do that next week. It's going to be a fun service. And here's why this is so important and why I'm so passionate about it. When I think about this map again, here's the question that I was thinking about. Who in the world is waking up thinking about the unchurched people in our community? There are a lot of people who are thinking about wells and kids and food, and they should. That's good stuff. But who on planet Earth is waking up thinking about the people who need to be reached right here in our community? If it's not us, no one is. And so that's why I think this verse is so powerful. The eyes of the Lord are searching the whole earth, looking to strengthen those whose hearts trust Him. Whose hearts trust Him in a way where they're willing to use their earthly resources in His strength to make an eternal difference. We have one life to live. And so let's live it well. Will you make that your prayer with me today? God, thank you that you invite us into this incredible mission with you. Thank you for the people who've invested in our life to lead us here, to make a difference, to make an eternal difference. Thanks for the way that you're using this church and have used this church in my life and in the lives of many of us here. And so, God, as we think about where you want to take us next, would you give us one heart, one vision, and an act of trust where we trust you to use our earthly resources to make a difference. God, we have one life and we want to live it well. Help us do that in Jesus' name. Amen.